Oh, is that what it is? Because it's just not there. Okay, let's get started, please. Thank you very much for braving the traffic to get here this morning. Welcome to Hogwarts. It's a wonderful room, and we heard last time, this is our second time here at the Minneapolis Club, we heard people really enjoyed it. Last time we were downstairs and there were big massive pillars right in the sight line. So we decided to move it up here, and very glad to have you here. Just a couple of housekeeping sorts of things. You probably, if you park behind, have a ticket. All you need to write is Ciceron MBA on the back, and they will not charge you on the way out. If you forget to do that, just tell them, and they will also let you out. So I think that's it for housekeeping. Restrooms, I think, are down the hallway, sort of by the elevators and so forth. So thank you very much. I'm Andrew Eklund. I'm founder of Ciceron, and this is our 5th Ciceron MBA. The first of 2014. We'll do 3 or 4 of these this year. We had 4 of them last year. The MBA, if you're wondering, used to stand for Marketing, Booze, and Art. And that was when we used to have it much more as an afternoon happy hour sort of gathering. And if you've been to the Ciceron offices, you know that we have a lot of artwork hanging up because we're one of the, or the only satellite art gallery for the Sudak Art Gallery in South Minneapolis. What that turned into basically just an excuse for all my freeloader friends to show up and drink our beer. So we moved it to breakfast time. And so now it's Marketing, Breakfast, and Action. And we're very happy to do this. These are always primarily a panel. And so I have a great panel who I'll introduce in just a moment here today. Just to give a sort of a little bit of a level set on what we're going to be talking about today, and also just from a standpoint of making sure that all of you who have smartphones, which I'm sure like 2 or 3 of you, we will have a hashtag today. It's Ciceron MBA for the hashtag. If you want to mention Ciceron in that, it's Ciceron HQ for the Twitter handle. As well, just want to sort of give you an idea of what we're going to talk about today. And that is that, as we all know, customers are, as we were just talking about a few minutes ago, getting all up in our business. And that is a very interesting way of sort of having to manage marketing and reputation and brand these days. And what it really requires us to do is live in a framework whereby strategy lives and breathes every single day, because a very highly activated and sometimes activist customer is going to tell you very incrementally each and every day how you can be a little bit better, how you can serve them better, how you can make your products a little better. And oftentimes when you hear brands talking about how to accommodate these very sort of activist customers, there's oftentimes it starts as fear. It starts as, what if they say bad things about us on the internet? Well, good luck and welcome to 1994. This is something that's been happening for a long time, and I think you're finding that the brands, like the ones oftentimes we have here on stage, are figuring out not just how to accommodate, but how to turn that into action, how to truly have an iterative relationship with our customers, and that we have an opportunity. This isn't something that happens to us. It's something that we get to have a relationship with customers whereby the more honest and transparent that we are, we have the ability to learn from them. and to interact with them and to provide a real human connection to the brands versus these very sort of rigid silos where you never really knew who was behind the curtain. I think you're finding that brands are becoming much more open, and that is providing us with a tremendous opportunity to become better organizations, better companies, better governments. And so, for those of you who have been to one of these before, this is not a new slide, but this is really the world that Ciceron lives in. This idea that it really is an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem of living, breathing strategy, whereby we are responsible for creating experiences, not just digital experiences, but overall experiences for clients and for our customers, for them to be able to interact with us. Again, not just advertising and marketing, but real true experiences of connections through content and human interaction. And the better that we do that, we earn the right, if you will, to earn advocacy. This idea that each and every one of us are now connected, I think now on average to about 380 other people via our various networks, and they have the ability to spread the word about us very, very rapidly. And in their own words, in ways that can really move the market. And so for us, this idea of brand advocacy is really huge. Just a couple of stats, and we'll get right to the panel. I know you didn't come to hear me. We love the infographic world. I just read a study the other day that visual learning, people learn at like 10,000% more than having to read stuff. So, especially in this world of everything going fast. We have a lot of opportunity now that recommendations, and how many of you are familiar with the Edelman Trust Barometer that comes out every year about this time? It's this idea of who do you trust, what's the information that you trust. I just gave a presentation actually last night, so the stats are sort of clear to me right now, but very low on that level are people like CEOs, the government, back in 2008, 2009, 2010, financial planners or the financial industry was really low. But on the very top are experts within your organization who have the highest degree of trust, academics, and then the third one that's always that I like is people like yourself. So again, if you're in the travel industry, and you're going to go on a vacation with kids, other people who have gone to a destination with kids, those are the kinds of people that you trust. So this is the world that we live in. We had this opportunity then to earn advocacy. One of the things that, and I'll introduce Marie in a second, that Marie and I are working on is that advocacy now increasingly is on the inside of companies, not just externally. This idea that we as employees of organizations, we have a choice, just like customers have a choice to go from company to company. We sort of in the talent industry, and we can either stay and work for a company or we have choices and we can work someplace else. And so this idea of internal advocacy becomes increasingly important. This idea that it's great if our outside customers love what we do and believe in our brands, but if we don't believe in ourselves, it's going to be very difficult for us to be able to sort of have a real authentic living brand. So, you know what, we started late, Tiffany, let's just skip it. There we go. All right, let's get right to the panel. Very happy to invite friends and colleagues to the stage today. On my far right is Josh Resnick, who is the CEO of the Wedge Co-op here in town, and you can imagine has been charged to grow the business with a very activist, if you will, community of customers who go into that store every single day. Dear friend Jim Bernard, who I've known for many, many years, is the Senior Vice President for Digital at the Star Tribune. We go back to the big charts days of the late 90s. Neighbors across the street, they used to have offices directly across 3rd Street from us. I think people used to date by holding up their phone numbers, like in the windows. This is a true story, by the way. Right? And then Marie D'Amato. And Marie, actually, she and I have been working now for a few months together and is now working very closely with Ciceron as a brand strategist, but has a very rich history working with brands in this space, specifically American Express, General Mills. I work very closely with the Yoplait team, as well as many others. So we're going to get started, and I'm going to get on stage. I don't, my one job today was not to rip my pants getting up for all these high things, so I've made it so far.
Still good?
I don't know.
Okay. You didn't hear anything, so.
You didn't hear anything good. So thank you very much, everybody. You know, I wanted to just have each of you just sort of give a little bit more of an introduction of yourself and sort of what keeps you up at night, staring at the ceiling when you think about this sort of, we could say it's a disruptive marketplace where these customers are, like I said, sort of getting really integrated into our daily lives. You know, what are the things that you sit thinking about how that changes maybe what you've done or even in your career? How is it different now? We'll start with you, Marie. You're good. She's going to beatbox for us.
Later. I think you said it all, Andrew. No, I think, you know, I don't know what keeps me up at night, but I think there's a lost opportunity. And as a marketer, and having done it for a long time now, the pendulum has swung from going to a focus group and listening to consumers every once in a while to listening to them on an ongoing basis and having the tools and the platforms to hear from consumers. And I think the frustration, I've been on client side and agency sides of the business. I think the frustration on the agency side is working with companies who really don't know how to take that information in and don't know how to absorb it, don't know how to listen to consumer, but also to interact with them and involve them. And I think we're still sort of stuck in this, we don't have time, we don't have the capacity, we don't know how to harness the input and the dialogue to really involve the consumer in the business. And I think the aha that I've had in doing that work is something really needs to change in the organization itself for them to be open enough to really involve the consumer in everything they do. And that's why I joined Andrew's team, really to figure out how we can help companies do that. Because as marketers, if we get hired into a project, and we're doing a one-time project, we can do a focus group or we can do some social listening and have it impact the project we're working on, but something systemically has to change in the organization for the consumer to be front and center in everything we do.
Good morning. So I think we should start with, like, what do I stay up late at night worrying about? It's kind of it's an intimate first question. Consumers are changing, their tastes around their media consumption are changing incredibly rapidly. And so what I worry about is our capacity to deploy what I think of as a community resource, 260 journalists that we employ at the Star Tribune, which should be deployed on behalf of, you know, what's important to our community, regardless of, you know, what you think about our brand or what you think about the Star Tribune. And what I worry about is that as the head of digital, I'm worried that I'm not able to get that asset deployed the way consumers want to use it. And that's something as difficult as we should probably do more Vikings coverage, believe it or not. Which, you know, you think, do we really need more Vikings coverage? You know, what types of coverage that we ought to be doing to the form in which consumers want to receive it and how they want to receive it. We have a relatively, we spend most of our time and energy in that news gathering, right? That's our big bet, that 260 people writing about Minnesota is going to be important to Minnesotans, and making videos and doing other things. So we tend to short on and yet how will we make a mobile app that doesn't piss you off? And so at night, you know, that's my biggest worry, and it's really consumer driven, to the point that we're here to talk about. Consumers have incredible power and incredible choice, and our capacity to exactly what you're saying, to listen to them and also to execute on the things that they wish are the things that make me incredibly anxious. Thank you for bringing it up.
That's why I put the pot of coffee in front of you, Jim.
And I guess for me at the Wedge, you know, if I look at our service offering and what the Wedge is about, you know, local organic foods, healthy foods, that's something we've been doing for 40 years since we started in 1974. So, I walk into, I should be careful what stores I say because I don't know who's from where, but you kind of go everywhere now and you see like these huge wall signs like, organic and support local farmers. And, I think our positioning in a way kind of has become depositioned. And, I still believe that we deliver more authentically than any of our competitors, but there's just like the competitive landscape has just gotten much broader. And, we have competition from everything, from Whole Foods going from, one store in the Twin Cities 10 years ago to now half a dozen, Trader Joe's. You've got Kowalski's going a lot more into that space. And then even kind of the Targets, Costco's, Aldi, they're talking a lot of organic. So it's how do you kind of continue to maintain what you've always been about in a world where there just is a lot more confusion. And what we have as an advantage is we've got close to 16,000 members. So people, those not familiar with the co-op model, people will actually pay $80. It's a one-time investment in the co-op. And then they get a share of the profits. They're the owners, they're my bosses. So people who are the customers in the store are the people I actually work for. But we have that close consumer connection because the people who are 80% of our sales are to those members. Anyone can shop there, but 80% of the sales are people who are members. So we have that close consumer connection, but how do we really tap into them at a deeper level and understand them, at a much deeper level? I think historically what we've done is, we have like this 18 question member survey that we did once every 2 years, and we put it out and kind of see how we're doing and put it away in a file. And since I came in a little over a year ago, it's how do we not check in with the consumer and say we're close to the consumer because they're our owners, so we know they're with us. But how is it a regular dialogue? So we're always back and forth and putting stuff out there, and we're not totally there, but we're getting better and better at it, and really kind of inviting them in more as having a two-way dialogue.
And I want to say something about that as well, that I think the ongoing dialogue too creates a sense of trust and intimacy. I mean, if you check in with somebody in any relationship once every 2 years and say, how am I doing? I think it's, there's probably a list of complaints if you haven't heard. But if you're talking to them regularly, I think it breeds trust, and there's a little more leeway if you don't please them all the time. So I think that's incredibly important.
One of the things I get nervous about sort of in our world is that we throw around a lot of 10-cent words, and then we forget to think about how important they are. I think disruptive is a 10-cent word, unfortunately, but when you really think about it, I would love to know specifically, and disruption isn't necessarily always a bad word, right? Sometimes they disrupt you in ways that need to be disrupted. So, sort of specifically, how are consumers impacting your daily lives through these tools that they have? And sort of when we say we stay up at night sort of thinking about, whether we're giving them the right devices and so forth, how are they really ingrained in our business? I mean, through feedback, through, and I'm not talking about light things like Foursquare check-ins at the co-op and things like that. I'm talking about more deeply, how are they giving you insights? How are they involved in this? How do they feel a part of who you are and what you're doing? And also for Marie, maybe, think about some of the things the work that you've done even with, say, General Mills and Yoplait and Chobani and all of this. But so I'd love to hear what you're saying, like some specifics.
Yeah. Well, I think one good example, I think one of the warnings is that it is tough to disrupt the consumer, and I think it's in my mind more about the dialogue and reaching them where they are. So for instance, beginning of July, we made a big announcement that we were doing our first expansion plan in like 15 years. And includes building like a centralized kitchen that's gonna have a market cafe. We're remodeling the store, and we're adding a second store. So again, it's this 3-year plan, these different elements. The important part of the communication to our member base was not in the what, but it was in the dialogue. So we can kind of get the message out there. These are the 3 steps of it. That's great. But as important, what everyone wants to know about is how are we soliciting feedback on it? And so a very big part of our communication plan was to say, here are the ways in which you can impact it. Because you are owners and this all impacts you, this is as much your expansion plan as ours. And so we created different forums for doing that, and we had coffees where we invited members in and had just an open forum like this with the board and with our leadership team. And we roughly across 3 of them had about 40 people who showed up. A lot more dialogue back and forth, but a lot smaller engagement. We did a survey digitally where we got 1,300 people, which for us was huge, and we got a lot of really rich feedback from that. And then in between, we created like a dedicated email address, and we also kind of trained our customer service staff, the customer service staff to kind of seek out information and bring stuff in. So I think it really was about customizing it, and some people were willing to spend 3 minutes on that survey, great, and some people were willing to take that hour to come in. But I think it was a little bit of like meeting people where they are and kind of getting the feedback in the form of what they present.
With the Star Tribune, the disruption has been kind of a complete change to our organization. If you go back, and it's not all that long, you don't have to go back very far. We used to put a newspaper on your doorstep, we still do, but if you didn't like what you saw there, you could talk to 20 friends. You used to not have 338 or whatever it was. You used to only have 20 friends, and you could talk to them about what you didn't like about the Star Tribune, what you did like, or how that touched you. Today, if Lavelle Neal doesn't post on Twitter the lineup of the Twins game at spring training by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, minutes after Gardy puts it up on the wall, Twitter kind of blows up, right? And they're like, Lavelle, what are you doing, right? And Lavelle is part of that. So he's engaged in a dialogue with people who are pissed off that he's not getting it done for them the way they want to see it, right? So that's taking a sports reporter who literally 10 years ago would only talk to people who he knew, and people who he covered his 300 people, and now it's virtually anybody who has got a Twitter handle who wants to follow him and interact with him can interact with him on dimensions of his coverage that are material and that he can change. And so that's not true for everything, but that's true. That's one little look, a very concrete example of how different the dialogue is now with our consumers. Our Facebook page, probably a quarter of the posts on our Facebook page are calls from reporters for sources. And that is a complete change in the way that we think about, reporters used to be like, if you take the kind of, anybody read the Cathedral and the Bazaar, the Cathedral and the Market, the reporters were in the Cathedral. They had their list of sources. They had their way to go out and get that. They still do that, but now they can put it on Facebook, and anybody in the entire community can say, oh yeah, I had a kid who did hockey and I want to talk about it, right? So it's really fundamentally shifted our dialogue with the community. And one of the challenges is that the community is very large and in some regards very crazy. And so trying to figure out how to do the listening in a way that is productive and moves us forward against a broader set of goals of being financially successful and helping the community and not chasing a crazy person down the rabbit hole is one of the biggest challenges we have.
Can I just jump, just as a customer?
Yeah.
I have comments on that. So I think that feedback actually creates greater loyalty. So I'm one of those crazy hockey fans, and I actually wrote an email to Michael Russo, the Wild beat writer, and within 15 minutes, I had like some thought about what the Wild should be doing, and he responded within 15 minutes. And so that dialogue was huge in terms of just creating greater loyalty, and I was that much more tied to reading his columns, and I feel like, hey, I kind of know this guy, even though we had like one email interaction. But there is something about you're not just getting feedback, but you're building loyalty through that.
And of all those journalists, Russo is an incredibly special, talented journalist, but his job has changed. Some of them haven't changed their jobs as much as they maybe could. We got an email about 8 months ago, it was a year, maybe a little longer than that, where a guy went through our weather, and he's like, here are all the things you're doing wrong in weather. And it was like bullet, 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 bullet. It was a super long email. And I took it and I was like, oh my God, we're doing all this stuff wrong in weather. And it turns out, it will not surprise you, we don't have somebody who spends all their day being an expert on weather data. but this guy was, and we double checked it, and we went around and we changed it, right? And we sent him a great thank you note, and so, you know, there are great examples like that, that are, you know, where the listening does build, you know, kind of business value.
Yeah, I would say the disruption that I've seen and experienced is in the yogurt category. When the yogurt wars were really between Dannon and Yoplait, and they were always, you know, leaders in the category, and I don't know if anyone had really saw it coming, but Chobani got in there and really positioned themselves as a threat to the long-standing leaders of the yogurt category, which was really interesting to see that happen. A friend of mine was working at Chobani at the time, and I was working for Yoplait, which was an interesting thing. But what he cites as one of the core reasons is that they were just very nimble, and they could take in the consumer and ideas and innovate quickly. And they could take in consumer ideas and input and be really relevant to the consumer needs and how the consumer taste has really changed over time. And, you know, Dannon and Yoplait were just sort of fixed in what they stood for and how they positioned themselves and weren't really budging and didn't see it coming. And I think that, yeah, I thought it was pretty disruptive. And they really talk about the insiders at Chobani, they talk about a cultural shift, really, in doing business, which was just, they worked in a lab and they ideated, they brainstormed all day long, and they listened to consumers and they talked about different product ideas and they got them to market pretty quick.
I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity at any time to raise their hand. I don't think we have a wireless, but we're a small enough room. I think that we can hear you if you speak up. So I will pause for a second. Any quick questions that we have for the panel on what's been said? Yes, Kevin.
Not really a question, but back to Chobani and Yoplait, maybe even Faye too, which just broke into campaign, but Chobani also had a great story that they could tell. And I think that was somewhat of a differentiator also with what was happening with Dannon and Yoplait. They didn't have that wonderful story about the upstate New York city and what Chobani did up there.
Yeah, and that was the transparency of here's what we do, here's how we make the yogurt, here's what's in it, yeah.
And the question there is, was the story believable? Right? Was it a rich, believable story?
I think it was, and I think varied to the product and how they were nimble and were able to develop sort of I don't know if it was a cult following at first, but it really had a very strong grassroots feel to it when Chobani first started coming into the market.
I have to, in full disclosure, tell you that we are working with Yoplait. So thank you for all the market research on Chobani. But be on the lookout, some interesting things are happening. Lisa, you had a question.
It was more of a comment as well to this script, but kudos to all of the work that you guys are doing. I can't imagine how hard it is to take everything on. But one of the things that I think you guys have done really well too is leveraging Instagram, not only to share photos and imagery, but specifically what's happening in the community, as well as engaging in that channel. One of the things that I love more than anything, like Sir Tribune likes a lot of my photos, and I think that active participation in searching for content specific to Minneapolis, especially around whether it be sporting, the wonderful weather we've had this winter. It's been really, really nice to see how engaged you guys are in that channel. And then also kind of leveraging user-generated content and shouting people out. So I think that's one of those really, it's not a hard thing, but it's something that people often don't do. And it's a very cool way to be relevant and participate in the dialogue in the community. So
Thank you.
Jim, you did mention something that I thought was the weather story was really fascinating to me, because it brings me to a topic that I'm very interested in, and that is that at times consumers aren't crazy, right? It may start as crazy as like, wow, maybe they have some good ideas. You went and you fact checked it, and now all of a sudden you're probably doing the weather differently, and all of a sudden that might start getting on the radar of senior leadership or something. It's like, wow, we can sort of crowdsource. Another 10-cent word, unfortunately, crowdsource great ideas about how we can be a better brand. I'm sure you're running into the same things, Josh, as you see you know, a big, you know, I think of Trader Joe's and Whole Foods are some things that they have resources to do that you might be challenged to do. Maybe they work, maybe they don't. And so how do these consumers truly help you make a better product? And do you have some other examples of or even of initiatives you're thinking about for the future that you can maybe tap into them and be very sort of open about it and say, you know, these are just some ideas that we have, and we're brilliant, but maybe not the most brilliant people, you know, help us out, figure out where should we go next. And do you think that helps sort of in the brand building nature of what you're trying to do?
I guess a couple parts to the answer. I mean, one is having the structure within your organization to take in the feedback. And, you know, we get kind of written comments, email comments. We've got one person who kind of is the director. They kind of sort it all out and kind of goes to the relevant person. And we have a rule, you know, you've got to respond to every customer comment within a week, ideally within 48 hours. And so it's kind of, you know, letting people know that they're heard. But I think one of the biggest challenges is also sorting out and knowing, you know, whether a customer comment, they're speaking for one, or if it's the viewpoint of 1,000. And also when you get kind of conflicting points of view, and I mentioned before about some of those community engagement things we did around our expansion, and they all took kind of a different turn, but there was one where there was a woman in there who was like, it's outrageous, everything you carry should be organic, and about 42% of what we sell is organic, which is actually very, very high for a grocery store. But she was like, it needs to be 100%. You guys are falling way short. And then we had a couple other consumers who were saying, you know, the most important thing is that you offer really healthy, quality food at a budget. And, you know, we are the working poor. We can't, you know, afford a lot of high-end stuff. And so you kind of get these conflicting views. And the reality is, if you went to 100% organic, your prices would go up, and those people wouldn't be able to shop. And so it's how do you, as a steward for the company and for the brand, kind of weigh these differing points of view and kind of come up with the best overall offering for the collective whole.
It's really great when someone sends you a bullet point list of what's wrong with your weather. That makes it super easy, but almost never happens relative to the kind of feedback we get is much more along what Josh is talking about. People who disagree, people who have ideas that are impractical. We're right now, the Star Tribune is just starting a 14-month project to redo all of our digital infrastructure. And so and we've been talking a lot about how to engage the customer, and I still see a lot of our legacy, and this is for, you know, our internal conversations still have that legacy footprint of like, but what if people don't like what we did, or what if their ideas are stupid, and then we have to, you know, listen to them, right? So, I mean, and you know, it's not quite that mark, but that we are struggling with that issue of how to invite, you know, hundreds of thousands of consumers who use our stuff into our development process in a way that will not make our development process really slow, because in the end, I know when I have to launch, and I know how much money I have to spend, and I know what's wrong with the product. So there's like 3 things that I know I need to fix. So one thing that we just did last week was we sent our team out to the Skyways to do basically empathy interrupts through the kind of human-centered design processes, and we're trying to, instead of kind of go big, find other ways, like 2 or 3 or 4 different ways that we can have customer touch points, a survey, some empathy work, some prototyping, and hopefully use that to drive us. But to be honest, I don't think we have it nailed, and I'm nervous about whether or not we'll get it right.
I have to ask you a question. How many people on the journalism side and on leadership would love the next generation of Star Tribune not to have user comments?
I can't answer that question. So user comments are, I don't know how many of you engage in our user comments, either participate in them or read them. About 18 months ago, we made a very major change to our user comments, and we went to pre-moderation on all the comments except the sports comments. And the pre-moderation means that we hire Minnesotans who read every comment, and then they determine whether or not they go live on the site. When we did that, it slowed the dialogue down because it takes some time for all those comments to be read. We do about 40 to 80,000 comments a day. And so, these people are cranking through the comments pretty quick. And so it slowed the dialogue down. So that was a major shift, and it was a leadership-driven shift because we felt like the comments were becoming, too antagonistic. They were distracting from the brand. They were not helpful. We're now in our new version opening that discussion again, and so I don't know what we'll do, whether or not we'll include them, but I feel like we have an obligation to provide a forum for people to talk about the news of the day. And so, I'm hoping that we'll end up with, continuing to have those comments. I hear from commenters a lot who, oftentimes use the word censorship and are, really incredibly hostile about why their comments were taken out. So there's always a balance of where you draw that line. Also how much play you give them. Are you going to start with them open so everybody can see them? And are you going to call out ones? Like, I really admire what the New York Times does, but I have no idea how many resources they spend on it. And we're already, when you think about it, 20 hours a day we have people reading comments. That's a real person who gets paid real money, and it's a big number for us over the course of a year. In order to have those, I can tell you this, it doesn't add up if you just said, well, how about all the ads against these?
But that's interesting too, because you also wonder, this sort of gets to the organizational side of this, is you are investing a lot of resources, and this goes for anyone on the panel, against a subculture of the whole that may be over-indexing resources on a group of people who don't necessarily represent the average Star Tribune user. Or in your case, how much resources do you apply against the loudest people? How do you know how do you know what's relevant versus what's noise? How do you mitigate against the person who wants 100% organic that would then push the prices up so high they would push you out of business? So I think that goes back to the next question, is how do you truly take all this consumer input and prioritize what's truly actionable versus what's noise? And if you could build the magic platform, what might that look like? And sorry, in our rehearsal, we didn't have that question, so.
It's a balance. The one thing that we haven't talked about, which is another way to look at consumers, is that consumers are leaving patterns of behavior across your enterprise, whether you just have a simple brochureware website, or you have a huge website like ours. And so one way to measure it is to take the kind of, I want 100% organic feedback and tie it against sales data, right? And so one way that we do that is we look at, okay, well, what are people doing when they're on the site? 100,000 people will visit our mobile site, every day. And that if that continues to grow, then we invest more in mobile. So to some degrees, the questions about investment, you can say, well, maybe we spend too much on comments, and that's kind of maybe a mission of love or whatever. But when I look across how many engineering hours am I going to spend to build certain kinds of product, it's easier to allocate those against a broader set of data that we get from consumers and trying to figure out what their behavior patterns are telling us in real time. We know we know that the second spot on the home page should deliver a certain click-through rate. And if that's not doing that, the editors will shift the story to get a different one in there. So consumer behavior in real time is impacting the product in a way that if it got to a point where all we had was listicles and pictures of women in bikinis, we would just stop that. That's not who we are, and would probably drive better traffic, right? But to the extent that on the margin you can use decision tools that are data-driven, that's one way that we do it.
Anybody Anybody else about the Dream platform?
I mean, I don't know about the Dream platform, but what I do want to say is I think the challenge is when so many different ways that people can talk to you and have themselves heard, and there's so many different platforms, how do you harness it in the right way? And I think there's a certain degree of respect you need to give to those who are talking to you. And they might be off topic, or they might be, telling you things that largely you can't do to the business. But I think the respect of we're listening, we hear you, here's why we can't do it, or here's why we may disagree but respectfully, or here's what we are doing, or here's something similar to it. I think that kind of dialogue is necessary. It's difficult to do at a large scale, but I do think there's an appreciation, even at the community at large. Those core customers that are on topic are seeing that and how you deal with people who are off topic, and they are also learning that you're a respectful organization. So I think it's necessary in the response, but I don't know if you need to be responsive and change it. Obviously, you cannot change your company for every comment or what you're doing, but I think the response is important.
Pause for a moment to see if we have questions out here. Mr. Eichen.
I'm really intrigued by how the Star Tribune has been engaging with the readership or with the comments and everything. I'm a little surprised about the only 40,000 comments, but I'm very impressed by certain reporters and how they are engaging, especially with me. I'm a big music fan, and I think Chris Reinschneider is one of the greatest advocates for the Star Tribune, along with John Bream. I think they're just doing wonders, because if you look on Facebook, how many comments, and they'll get hundreds of people that will chime in. I think that's really engaging and interesting. My question is, I'm aware of the Sport Engine relationship with the sports hubs, and I'm wondering, has that positively impacted your business? And moving forward, as you look at infrastructure, are those hubs going to continue, or are they a positive thing on the bottom line of your business?
That's a good question. For those of you who don't know, we operate 18 high school sports hubs. Minnesota Girls HockeyHub.com, Minnesota Boys Basketball HockeyHub.com, golf. There's 18 of them. 18 little sites kind of in a box with a local company called TST Media. And if you don't know them, you should definitely take a look at what they're doing. Really super interesting. They're growing really fast. They have a really good story. So what's interesting about that is that, one of the challenges for the Strib is how to take very big, kind of the big and make it small. How do you take, this kind of, I'm going to put 500,000 newspapers out and do 100,000, site visits, et cetera, but make it relevant. And so high school sports is a way to become knit into real consumers' lives. And what you find is that the statistics that we're gathering about high school hockey, for example, are without peer. We have pretty much all of the statistics for all the games of hockey that were played yesterday, and they are online right now. They were in the paper, and that helps parents and coaches feel connected, and it drives a lot of traffic. And so, yeah, we'll continue to do that. It's hard when you get down to sports that don't have good statistics, because the coverage is relatively thin. And so then it my daughter started cross country, and I suddenly they were like, all right, already with cross country. I'm like, well, we got to do this with this and this with this. And so that draw as a parent to have it be ESPN-like, even though it's 7th grade cross country. Nobody cares about my back of the pack daughter except me, and she's awesome. And so I think it's, that's always a tug and pull, and so we're pretty happy with the way that the sports hubs have scaled to 18 sports, and that we've got apps and people are using them, and the traffic is really excellent. So I would expect that we would continue to support those.
I'd like to broaden John's question a little bit to something that he mentioned when he talks about music journalists. The value is that you have 2, and if not more, people on the inside who are really actively engaged in their subject matter and their audiences. So I want to broaden that out a little bit in the sense that at some point in the past that may have been an organizational challenge, like they're going off script or it's not adding up the paper. All of a sudden you have these sort of people inside the companies that are becoming, well, in a non-ironic sort of way, rock stars on staff. Same thing for you. You know, I'm sure in your case, if there's somebody who on staff is an expert in a certain kind of farming technique or a certain way of procuring certain kinds of produce. And so my question is, in our first one of our early charts, we said this idea that the number one trust level that consumers have are with experts who have not typically always been on the front lines of direct consumer interaction, who now are required to be.
Yeah.
And so maybe talk through how you either mitigate risk or how you unleash that so that you really are giving access that people are looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a certain trust level that the expertise in the organization exists at kind of the lower levels, and those are the people who are on the front lines interacting with customers every day. And I think for an organization to be successful today, they've got to have some leeway to, kind of do their show. And the way I became a customer of the Wedge, I was a customer there, a decade before I worked there. Literally, I walked in, and you kind of started in the produce area, and I stopped the first person I saw, and I said, I'm looking for good produce, and he's like, let me give you a tour. And he's like, these ones are great. He's like, these ones are pretty good. And I think gained some trust by, telling me what were the things that he would recommend and what would he eat if he would bring them home, and which were the things that were just so. And literally every week I went in, and I just said, Mark, what's great this week? And, now 10 years later, I'm there every day, and I still get the tour from him. But I think having that and also being comfortable as an organization for him to say, like, hey, don't get this one. I wouldn't get that. We're good with that. And, we've actually, it's how do you institutionalize that as well? So it's not just like, it's okay for you to do it, but it's expected. And I think either tripled or quadrupled our investment in training. And a part of the training is actually like sending people out to the farms and out to the ranches. And we do a lot of that where, the meat guys are going out, once a month or every couple months to our different suppliers. And so when somebody, comes in and asks about, the ketogenic chicken, it's like, oh, well, funny you should ask. We were there last week, and here's how they procure their feed for the chickens, and they know the whole story. And I think having that information and the communication is just paramount.
You can almost see in the future how they can do that in real time, live, right, through Instagram or whatever. And they're on at the ranch, they're on the farm, they're doing a little video interview with the farmer, and all this. It makes everything so authentic and believable, and all this. You can see that too.
Yeah, absolutely. When we do those farm trips, we include it in our Facebook page, and that's part of it. Our meat team was out at Ketogenic Farm this week, and pictures. And again, I think that gets back to the Chobani example of that authenticity. It's total transparency. Like, you want to buy our chicken? Here's, we're out there, we're inspecting it, and we're going to show you pictures of how it all is produced.
It makes me think of an example that some former colleagues at WSJ talked about, which was as video was coming up and news video was coming up in the kind of blog network that media people read, WSJ journalists were kind of ridiculed because the quality of the video was so poor, and everybody there was comparing it to video that they were watching that was network-based. And what Alan Murray, who kind of spearheaded that effort, said, yes, but consumers love it. They love it when Russo is now doing a 1-minute video every day, and sometimes he's in a taxi cab like this, right, doing it. And for people who are crazy about hockey, it has all the authenticity of like, oh, Russo's in his hotel room because the game is over, right? And so the quality level that we would normally apply doesn't have to apply.
There's intimacy to that.
Right, and so, WSJ realized that they could scale it by giving people kind of prosumer or even crappy equipment and just, get people, so they changed the entire way they were gathering it so that they could get more clips and bring people in. But they were made fun of, and so that's always the downside. We've had a couple of very nice complimentary examples, but I'm sure that people in this room, and I could bring up a dozen places where our steps to have those dialogues with consumers have been awkward, embarrassing, not illegal, but like we've had problems, plenty of problems, because it's not easy to do, right?
I want you to wear a GoPro helmet and follow you all day long, Jim, and what the day in Jim and I's
Just like
life.
sitting there doing the email.
Right. Any other questions? Yes, thank you. So last question, and then we will adjourn, and thank you everyone for your questions and your attention. What does the future look like? I know that that's a really broad question, and maybe I'll try and frame it a little bit. Have we swung so far this way on sort of consumer chaos, or are we just at the beginning of it? Secondarily, does the future look, and this is definitely a leading question, but it's like, is it requiring organizations to be much more open, much more porous, where management isn't from top down, but somehow has to figure out how to enable and manage these relationships so that we steer people in the right direction. So in your case, Jim, it's not that we're over applying resources and over indexing for the crazies, but we're actually investing time in the people who are going to attract advertisers, who are going to attract the kind of news that's going to increase the quality of journalism. In your case, Josh, increase the number of high basket size people who are going to advocate for you. So I'm just curious, what's the future look like? What's the organization, and where are we on the pendulum right now?
Well, I'll be very brief. I think that the consumer's advocacy is the low switching cost to go somewhere else, and so the listening organization and the organization that engages a consumer in a dialogue has a better chance to win. The yogurt example. If you don't do that, then I think what happens is people will just switch, and switching has just become, especially in my world, so easy. And so if you're not listening and in dialogue with consumers, your chances to be part of the next set. So it's not so much like a consumer will tell you what you're doing wrong. I mean, that's the simplest piece of it. It's that you can't check in every 2 years with the survey anymore, because Trader Joe's is going to put 6 more stores somewhere, right? So the competition is what I think is driving the need for organizations to struggle with this issue.
I go back to the mid-90s when I was in business school, and the best class I took was something called service management, and it was kind of about how you run a service organization. And I remember, one of the things they talked about was lifetime value of the customer, and actually as an assignment, we had to take a bad customer service experience and write to someone senior at the company and talk about our lifetime value. So, kind of give the Delta example, if you fly 4 times, $250 a year, you're spending $1,000 a year. Over 50 years, you're a $50,000 customer. And so it was kind of saying, don't think of me as, don't think of this as one transaction, reminding the company, I'm a $50,000 transaction. I think fast forward to today, and you talk about 300 contacts, I think it's probably more like 1,000 contacts. And so now that customer who is worth $50,000, multiply that times 1,000 and they're worth $50 million. And I think if we think of customers that way as, $50 million in, transactions over a lifetime through their networks, I think it's not, falling over and acting stupid, but it's how do you create like a deeper dialogue. So it's not about just crisis management, but it's how are you investing and proactively investing in that relationship so that if they do have an experience where, they bring home a melon that for some reason is not good, that you've built up enough points and you've built up a good enough relationship with them that they're going to come to you and they know that you're going to take care of it, and you've built that up, and it's not kind of just how do you kind of avoid disasters and prevention of people going in and just telling you that works.
Yeah, and I think that the future holds a big opportunity. All this stuff isn't easy, especially when you're dealing with 80,000 comments and a lot of consumer input. But I think the opportunity is not just to listen and respond, but to involve consumers in business. And I think that that's a real shift too. I mean, I think we sort of begrudgingly, oh, God, we get these comments, we've got to listen to them, respond. But I think there's also this sense of like, actually, there might be some really interesting things in those comments that actually change your business. And we've seen that happen where we take a piece of input and we're like, wow, this seems like it really could move the business. We apply it and it does. And I think we can't miss those opportunities because, to Jim's point, our competitors are doing it and we need to be doing it too. And I think the one step further beyond that is it needs to be, the dialogue with the consumer needs to be authentic or it falls apart. And if there isn't this shared belief that we could learn from each other and this shared belief and advocacy for the brands that we're talking about, then I don't think it goes very far. And this goes back to what Andrew brought up in the beginning, which was brand advocacy on the inside of organizations. The big organizations that are winning really do embrace the consumer, but also believe in the brand and are sharing those beliefs and that passion for the brand with their consumers.
Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank our panelists for being here as well. Please give them a round of applause if you will. I'd also like to thank Tiffany Allen, who's in front over here running the show, who ran not just today, but ran the pre-show and getting you all here. So thank you, Tiffany. My big, gigantic sales pitch is that we do have something called the Ciceron Snapshot. How many are digital Snapshot? How many people here have had one of these done for their firms? Great. And it's just it's something that we offer to people to use publicly available data to give them just a really good idea of sort of where they're benchmarking in terms of channel performance, attraction, reputation. It's just something that we do. I don't know why we do it for free, but we do, and people really like it because they like free, really cool stuff. So that's what we're doing. Tiffany, do we have our next date set yet?
I have it in my phone, I'll check.
Okay, we'll come back to that. We have another, it'll be this summer. Also want to thank Twin Cities Business for being our sort of media sponsor in all of this. They've been very helpful. And Kevin Dunn, who was here, who I believe, is runs all digital there. So
May 15th.
May 15th, which is going to be a sunny, warm day. This would be, it'll be 20. Yeah, exactly. That's right, yeah. And this will be like a solarium in here. So again, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for sticking around for a few extra minutes due to weather and traffic. And please, as well from an advocacy standpoint, tell your friends and colleagues about this program. It's something that we, not only willingly, but we really enjoy putting these on. We learn just as much as you, I hope. If you have ideas for topics that you would like, if you would like to be a panelist, if you know other people that you think would be a great panelist that could inspire you, just let any of us know. We have these orange badges on. And we'd be happy to do this. This is how we're going to crowdsource, if you will, future events. So thanks again for being here. Enjoy, be safe, and we'll see you in May.
Yes.